legalizefreedom.com.
Good evening. I'm Greg Moffat of legalizefreedom.com. That's legalize-freedom.com. And today I want to ask you to stop watching the news. Now, the background to all this is, of course, the 2020 coronavirus crisis and all the attendant hysteria. I'm recording this in the first few days of August, and the situation is ongoing and continues to evolve at a fairly rapid pace. Now, back when this all started, for most of us in Europe and USA, this was in March, from the moment that you were locked into your home and more or less forbidden to leave, the news media, television media, other broadcast media, online, plunged into overdrive in a way that I, for one, have never witnessed. And I've been an observer of how news and information is disseminated to us for many decades now. And I've never seen anything like this before. Even in the wake of 9/11, when there was a lot of hysteria and fear-mongering and panic and irrationality, it's got nothing on this. And of course, that was almost 20 years ago, and we did have the internet and we had 24/7 news, but it's much more ubiquitous now. Most people in even remotely technologically advanced parts of the world are reached by this pervasive media matrix. And one of the things that was very notable about the coverage of the virus crisis was something that's well documented by observers of news media, and that's to say the repetition of a more or less identical message. But again, I've never seen anything on this scale. You can find on YouTube videos that people have cut together from various news outlets and regional stations around the US and other countries, demonstrating how the local news anchors are basically reading from a script. So, two aspects of this. You've had the pervasive 24/7 fear-mongering and hysteria about the virus situation, and every channel you turn, you get the same message. Now, whether you think the news coverage has been useful and positive or not, the point is it's everywhere all the time and there's no variation in it. That immediately causes me to raise an eyebrow, at the very least. Now, I don't believe that it has been helpful. I think it served, as the news media often do, to aggravate the situation, to add to people's worry. And it's nothing less, it has amounted to nothing less than something that I highlighted in another recent video, which was called Words Are Weapons, Don't Hex Yourself. What we've been witnessing the last few months it's been the usual type of manipulation of our emotions and of our thoughts and our actions that we come to expect. And I'm not saying, by the way, that all news media that you see on your TV are somehow the enemy. They're not. There is some variation in there, despite what I've just said, in terms of the people and their individual motivations. But it's never been as top-down controlled as it is now. Hence the potential for its ubiquitous presence and its lockstep message for being dangerous, because it is controlled by fewer people. The information is coming from fewer sources. It seems ultimately to be disseminated from perhaps one source. So yeah, this is nothing less than manipulation. And in its mantra-like repetition, it amounts to magic. Again, see my earlier video for more thoughts on this. And this is not a new idea. If you look into the history of propaganda and advertising, you see the same principles at work in news, which is, saying something over and over again. For example, second wave, vaccination, lockdown, vaccination, second wave, lockdown, vaccination, second wave. And after a while, it's very easy to become programmed by the media by their own terms. And what happens is that there's already precious little space in mainstream media for nuance and subtlety and, oh, well, hang on a minute, what about this? And have we considered that? It's black and white. And going back to 9/11, this very much reminds me of the idiot boy Bush Jr., George, who said in one of his pronouncements after the Twin Towers attack, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. So there was no room for ambiguity, no room for considering other people's points of view. The terrorists and everybody put into that corral, and anybody associated in any way, were all motivated. We had to assume bad motivations in everything they said and did. And you could say, well, maybe the people who attacked the Twin Towers did have bad motivations, but they have a point of view as well. And that doesn't mean that you have to think that, for example, a terrorist attack could have anything good come of it, but simply that there are different ways of looking at the world. And what we're seeing with the current situation, it's different from, this is like a rolling situation. It's not a one-off. It's not like as with a terrorist attack, but in the discourse around it, we've been robbed of any room for colour and nuance. And that's quite often where the most important dimensions of any discussion lie. And quite often when in conflict resolution, when you're trying to get past polarised situations, I saw this in my case in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. What allowed that to happen was for people to stop demonising each other and to see that there was more to the situation than simple black and white, good and evil. That there were nuances, subtlety, and that people that you were opposed to ideologically and maybe even had a conflict with weren't necessarily simply evil human beings. And this elimination of subtlety is very Orwellian. And it reminds me of, in 1984, which of course is Orwell's best known book and the one that's most applicable to our current situation, the one with which most commentators are drawing parallels. Then there you have the newspeak situation where the party and the Big Brother media apparatus present things in incredibly childlike and simplistic terms, and they repeat them over and over again. And the net result is a gradual reduction in vocabulary, the number of words that people have available to them, and a very simplified form of grammar. And over time, this starts to affect the way that we think, or that one can think, because the ideas that we can articulate become less because we have less words and concepts to work with. And it does seem at the minute that, and I do a double take on this, not a double think, a double take almost every day, how almost every dystopian novel that I can think of that I read growing up and in later years, I seem to be increasingly living in it. And that's maybe a subject for another day. But certainly the Orwellian concepts of very dumbed down and simplistic information for the masses is certainly playing out now. Now, something even more insidious than this is that there's nothing actionable in it, in any of the information, as far as I can see. And again, I have taken my own advice and stopped watching it, but to the extent that information does reach me, and based on past experience, there's nothing actionable. There's nothing you can do. Now, there is something you can do, and that's partly what I'm saying today. Stop watching it. But as far as the news media is concerned and the output and the way that many people are left feeling, there's nothing you can do. You're absolutely helpless. You're made to be very afraid and told that there's nothing you can do. And the only people with answers are officials. And mostly you don't like the answers they've got, but we're told that's the only game in town. So apparently, I mean, in all of this, where were any positive suggestions, for example, at the height of infection, where were even simple suggestions about what you could do to boost your immune system, for example? I mean, even if government officials want to come on and give daily briefings and present terrifying statistics, wouldn't it have helped to say, and by the way, the following things will help boost your immune system and might give you a better chance in avoiding becoming infected? None of that. Quite the contrary. Apparently, the strategy was to stay home, binge on Netflix, binge on junk food, binge on gambling and pornography, and plug into tech, sit on your ass, basically become a big, terrified, quivering blob of lard, and that's the plan. And wait for the next instruction, the next thing to do, many of which are actually contradictory in themselves. And as I say, we're recording this in August, and as the news media tends to talk more about cases rather than deaths, so that you get the feeling that the virus situation is gradually doing this, the media is actually ramping up their rhetoric in many ways. They've changed it a little bit, of course, because now they're talking more about medium to long term. So it's not about what you'll do today, what you'll do tomorrow. It's what we'll be doing months and years from now. And again, with this air of terrible certainty about it. Again, there's nothing you can do. There's no alternative. Don't even begin thinking about how things might be different. They won't be. So again, it's just turning this crank, and it seems very curious now when there should be more space in the news media to talk about positive strategies or what, if anything, could come of this that might be positive. There's none of that. The alternative media, of course, are offering some of that, and that's why it's important to have alternative media. But again, that in itself is a discussion for another day, and the alternative media is kind of a free-for-all, really. So there's good, bad, indifferent. There's every colour of everything in terms of quality in the alternative media. Now, I can't imagine thinking about the effect of all this on the collective and individual psyche. I can't imagine what the toll of all this fear will be, not just on people's minds actually, but on their bodies. Because absolutely, there are people dying of fear, people getting sick through stress, and not just people who have lost their jobs or become bankrupt. I mean, anybody would struggle to deal with that. But there are people who still have their jobs and are solvent and still have homes and families. It's kind of together, who are sick with fear. And we're beginning to see, actually the effects of that physically began to show up quite quickly. I'm not just talking about suicide, but in terms of people just getting ulcers and other illnesses through stress. But the psychological cost of this, I fear, at the minute is looking incalculable. If all of this ground to a halt tomorrow, there will be people reeling from this for years to come. So God alone knows what effect this is going to have on people psychologically if this goes on as we're told it will for months or potentially years, or if it does indeed become the N word, that two N's, which I won't utter, you know exactly what I mean. Now, a lot of people resist the idea of stopping watching the news because they feel that even if it is extremely negative and it appears to peddle little other than fear and doesn't offer anything positive or anything that you can actionable, any steps that you as an individual can take, or amongst your family, your friends, your community, apparently there's nothing you can do on that level. But they still worry that they need to be aware of what's happening, and a sort of a need to know. In my experience, the last news broadcast I listened to, I haven't watched the television news broadcast for a very long time, but the last radio broadcast I listened to was on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day as it happens. I've not listened to anything since. And I discovered what I kind of already knew from being away from home for maybe a month at a time, occasionally in the past, that if there's anything that you absolutely need to know, really would affect your life, and you need to know, it will find its way to you on a grapevine. Somebody will email. You'll just know that the ways are many and various that will come to your attention. And this should also give us pause to think about what we need to know. Because when you unplug from the media matrix, you then realize how little of what they're saying you actually need to know about. It has no effect, positive effect on your life, quite the contrary. So not only does it not help you get on and live the happiest and most fulfilling life that you can, it hampers that. It puts obstacle after obstacle in your way. If not passive obstacles that you just have to step over and go around, and it takes longer and is more expensive, more costly to do everything that you want to do. There's also active obstacles that get put in your way. Ideas, worries about, I was going to do this, but they say I can't do this because of this. And on and on. It never ends. So don't worry about the FOMO, as they say in retail, fear of missing out. Forget that. You're not missing anything. And I mentioned advertising earlier on, and it's been very interesting how advertising has sort of gone along the same trajectory as the TV news media at the moment. I've never seen on commercial channels, the BBC, for example, is not strictly a commercial channel. They don't have advertising as such, paid advertising by third parties. But in commercial channels, I've never seen news output and the advertising that is sandwiched in between so aligned, so in lockstep. All of the advertising for all that consumer junk was all COVID branded, excuse me, very quickly. It normally takes ad agencies months to work up a new campaign, get ads produced, all of that, seemingly overnight. Everything you can think of, bleach, beans, holidays, cars, mattresses, the lot, were all COVID branded. Whether it was showing their salespeople in little squares all working remotely, or whether it was they were keeping you safe. You know, get this brand of breakfast cereal, it's keeping you safe. You know, we've added disinfectant to it, whatever it happens to be. So, and the advertising has always been a loud technicolor noise in between segments of your favorite TV program. But now I find it almost unbearable. Maybe it's that if you spend time away from this and you try to come back to it, you really see what it was you were putting yourself through. But if you take the news shows now, the 24/7 rolling news, the ones that have advertising segments every 10 minutes, if you take an hour of that and even just listen to it, never mind watch it, it's an all-out assault on the senses, on the psyche at every level, from your waking consciousness through to your subconscious, your unconscious, right across the board. It is a full spectrum assault. You don't need it. Stop paying attention to it. You will find, depending what else is going on in your life, that you can have a tremendous, initially a sense of peace and space at just not having that noise infecting your mind and the space in which you live. But the clarity of thought, when you begin to separate your thoughts and your ideas from those that are raining in from outside, that can be incredibly empowering, and it can take a while to do, but give it a try. Just stop watching the news, try it for 24 hours, see how that feels. And I mean completely go cold turkey. No listening to 5 minutes of it, no catching the headlines, just no radio, no internet, no television news. Now, if you're consuming other media, so social media, movies, TV, whatever, but in particular, switch off from the government and media propaganda outlets. You'll find you won't lose anything, and there's a hell of a lot to gain. Television is the virus. The news is the virus. The virus is in your television. The virus, predominantly, as I said before, is in your mind. And you can do something about that. Now, I was reminded today, when I came to record this, of this book by a former Legalized Freedom guest, Dmitry Orlov. It's very relevant to today's topic. The book, as you can see, is entitled Shrinking the Technosphere, Getting a Grip on the Technologies that Limit Our Autonomy, Self-Sufficiency and Freedom. This is also a show on legalizefreedom.com. You can also find the two of us in conversation on YouTube on this very subject. Now, as you imagine from the title, what Dimitri's talking about is reducing our reliance on technology in general, having very well chosen technologies that can actually help us, and filtering out those that don't. And I include the assault of the media matrix and television news in the useless technologies. Maybe the medium, the media, the devices, for example, can be useful to us, but certainly in terms of content, that should be discarded. And it's interesting that since the so-called lockdowns, the direction of travel since then, whether it's in commerce, in domestic life, in entertainment, it's all been about increased use of tech. It's been plug into more tech, stay in, work from home, don't meet people, don't meet your family, talk online, the aforementioned gambling, pornography, Netflix, order your food online, don't go out, buy your beer at the supermarket, come back home, drink it at home, plug into tech. So it's like the aforementioned early 20th century novel, The Machine Stops by E.M. Forster, which basically predicted all of this. It's like each of us in our own little bubble, and our source of information is going to be the screen in the corner. Not a good idea. So I'm Greg Moffat, legalizefreedom.com, and I'm asking you, please stop watching the news.
legalizefreedom.com